T-Bone is on the other side. T-Bone is on the other side. T-Bone, Prime Cuts, podcast on the other side. T-Bone, Prime Cuts, podcast on the other side. T-Bone, he sets the tone, originates, opinionates. T-Bone, musicality, originality, any day of the week. Prime Cuts, podcast on the other side. T-Bone, Prime Cuts, the talk space where musicians matter.
Welcome to T-Bone's Prime Cuts on the Other Side, Episode 1. Today's guest, Steve the Deacon Hunter. Now, you may not know the name, but I guarantee you know the music. The guitar on Peter Gabriel's Salisbury Hill, that's him. That first solo when Aerosmith's Train Kept Rolling, that's him. That interlude that made Lou Reed's live version of Sweet Jane his first gold record, that's him. He also played with Mitch Ryder in Detroit, Alice Cooper, Julian Lennon, Bette Midler, Tracy Chapman, Lee Roth. The list is endless. You're going to have a great time listening to this today. Without further ado, here's Steve Hunter. Welcome to T-Bone's Prime Cuts on the Other Side. Our guest today is the great Steve Hunter. Steve, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you, T?
Good. A lot of people may not know the name, but they've heard you. Now, as a guitarist, I played for 32 years before I had some health issues. I can't play anymore, but I've always known who you are. And even, like you say, my mother, I played her Salisbury Hill last night. She doesn't know modern music, and she knew that song.
Yeah.
Now,
well, I know a lot of people like that a lot of good musicians that,
right.
They do a lot of stuff that people have heard, but they didn't know who was playing what, There's
right.
a lot of stuff, so.
Yeah, like I worked for Steve Cropper for 10 years, and I'm surprised at how many people don't know his name, but they definitely know the music.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Midnight Hour, that's the first thing I think of.
Yeah. Now, I want to start off by asking you about Decatur, Illinois, because I actually lived there for 6 months in 1968, and my sister was born there.
Wow, no kidding.
And my dad had a job where he moved around a lot until 69. We actually moved to the Metro Detroit area.
Oh,
and
yeah. Right.
We're able to stay there. I stayed there till 2007. But yeah, we were in Decatur. So what was it like growing up there, and what were your experiences?
No, what the great thing about Decatur is you got to look at it. I when I look back on it, it's like a Norman Rockwell painting. It's really the white picket fence and all that. It was really a great place to grow up. When I got older and I had after I got drafted and all that stuff, and I'd been around and seen the world, I kind of wanted to go out and see some more of the world. But growing up there was really a great thing. It was probably the best place I could have grown up.
That's good. Now, I know that you were in, like you were talking about the service. I know that you were in Vietnam. You were in Japan, right? And
I was in Okinawa, yeah, which at the time wasn't. I don't think it was considered part of Japan yet. But when the Americans pulled out, then it became accessed by Japan. It was originally a part of Japan, but when we occupied it during World War II, I don't know, it was all political stuff,
Yeah.
And then we sort of signed it back over to Japan when we left there.
So, you were X-ray technician. I had read that you would even consider going into that field or becoming a doctor at one point.
Yeah, it's true. When I was growing up in Decatur, the school system there was really good, I have to say. My all the way grade school all the way through high school I had some great teachers. I mean, really, really great teachers. And I was very much into science, and I was into math and biology and zoology, physiology, all that stuff. And I had actually thought about at one point becoming a doctor. So when I got into the Army and they put me in X-ray, I thought, well, great. This is like I'm getting like a little preliminary idea of what it's like, to work in a hospital. So it was all good. But the funny thing is, though, when I decided when it came to me that I'm going to become a professional musician, that medical thing has kind of stayed with me the whole. I really admired doctors who could diagnose diseases or maladies.
Right.
It was sort of like a Dr. Sherlock Holmes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, I was very much into the diagnostic part of it. So I was either thinking about that or get into some sort of medical research or something. And like I say, it's still part of me. I still think about it. I read about it and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, after you got out of the service, you went back to Decatur and you really started becoming, building up a reputation as a hot guitarist in the area.
Well, I don't know. There weren't very many guitarists. It's like I finished third, but there were only three. So no, I knew once I got out of the service, I knew that I had to learn how to play guitar better than what I was doing. And at the time, you got to remember, at the time, we're talking about the '60s. There wasn't really any place you could go to take lessons.
Right.
Like Jefferson Airplane or something. So the only way you could learn was to sit down and listen to records and try to learn things off of records, which is exactly what I did. And then whatever you learned off of records, the only way to get that under your fingers and be comfortable with it was to play in bands and play in front of an audience, so that you're forced to play, and you have to find ways out of, if you get yourself in trouble, you have to find ways. That's learning how to be a musician. And the only way to learn how to do that is play in a band. So I was, during the day and through the week, I was listening to B.B. King records and trying to learn as I could. And then on the weekends, I was in a band called the Light Brigade, and we used to play gigs all the time. And we used to play a lot of our favorite stuff. We were like a cover band, and we played all of our favorite songs. And that's how I learned how to play and become a musician, try to figure out what a musician was.
So
it was good training. It was good training.
Oh, yeah. Now, shortly after that came the Mitch Ryder thing. Now, how did it all come about?
Well, that was funny, because when I was in Decatur at the time playing in bands, I met a guy named John Sauter. John Sauter he's a bass player, and he played in several bands in Champaign, Illinois, and in Decatur, and in and around our central Illinois area. And he was a great bass player. And I had lost touch with him. I didn't know where he was or anything. But one day I get a call from him, and he said, "Listen, I'm up here in Detroit, and I'm playing with Mitch Ryder, and they're looking for a guitar player. You should come up and try out, audition." And at first I thought, well, that's kind of weird. It's Detroit. There's got to be a million guitar players. I mean, why haven't they found anybody yet? And so I thought, well, okay, I got nothing to lose. I always loved Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wheels.
Oh, yeah.
So I thought, well, good. It'll be a chance to meet Mitch Ryder, So I threw my guitar in the car, and I drove however long, 6, 8 hours, however long it takes to drive to Detroit. When I got there, of course, when you're young, you can get out of driving 8 hours and just go right into it and start. I couldn't do that now. It'd probably take me a week to get over it. But I go upstairs. They have a ballroom kind of place in this building. The building was all kind of condemned and weird building, but they had this great big room that they rehearsed in. And when I went in there, they had a Marshall half stack, which I had only seen pictures of.
Right.
I actually plugged into one, and I swear to God, I thought right then, you know what? I don't care if I get the gig or not. I'm going to be able to play through a Marshall, and that's all I care about, literally. So I plugged in and I turned it on and I turned it up, and I thought, oh, this is heaven. This is absolute heaven. So John was there, Johnny Sauter was there, and Mitch came in, and Johnny Bedanzik, the drummer, Johnny B.
Oh yeah.
And I didn't know any of their tunes, so we just jammed on Cream tunes. And I'm telling you, it was just glorious. I had an SG through a Marshall, and it just sounded heavy. So I thought, man, this is the most fun I've had in a long time. This is just great. So if I don't get the gig, at least I had a great time.
Oh yeah.
You know. And so I don't remember if they said anything right then. I actually think I packed up and went back to Decatur, and then I got a phone call saying, yeah, we'd like to have you in the band. So I packed a few things and drove back up there, and we rehearsed for a little while. It was kind of close to Christmas, so I think we rehearsed for a little while. In that time, I also met Bob Ezrin, who I found out later was a producer, which at the time I didn't know what a producer was, but he was going to produce this album for Mitch Ryder. It's going to be called Detroit. The band was called Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
And we were going to do this album. Well, I was thrilled with that because I'd never recorded an album before. So I wanted to see that. I wanted to experience that and see what happens, and eventually learn what a producer was.
Right.
And so I was really excited about that part of it. But I think I came back home for Christmas and then went back up to Detroit. And then we started rehearsing, and then we did a little tours here and there. And we recorded some of it in Chicago and some of it in Toronto. And it was a bit disjointed, but boy, it was a wonderful experience. I knew right then and there that I was doing what I wanted to do for sure, because I was absolutely fascinated and enthralled by the recordings, being in a recording studio and doing that whole process. I really loved it. And I just wanted to learn as much about it as I could. So that was all good. That was all good.
No, and that started your association with Bob Ezrin.
Yeah, it did. Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
the second album I did with him was the Berlin album.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So now in Detroit, you rearranged the Velvet Underground song "Rock and Roll."
Yes.
Lou Reed. I read that Lou Reed liked it so much that he contacted you.
Well, he tried to find Bob Ezrin and I both, because he had found out Bob Ezrin produced that album,
right?
The Detroit album, and then he found out who I was, the guitar player, and he contacted Bob first, and and they sort of talked. Well, yeah, Steve's available. We can get him. Well, I was really thrilled about that too, But yeah, that was all. That was a wonderful experience, actually doing a Lou Reed album, and then this Berlin album. It's such a fabulous album. I was really proud of it. One of my favorite albums that I've ever done.
That's one where I don't think the people were ready for it.
No,
it's so good, but at the time it wasn't accepted, and then over time people are like, oh man, this is really good.
Well, I mean, we'll have to admit this is in early 70s, about 73.
Yeah, sure.
And it was a really, really depressing album, and it was real. It was about real life experiences, and well, of course, the two people were not real. They were, part of Lou's nation. But the thing is that what they experienced was very real, and just a little over the top, but very real. And it was also kind of anti-drug in a way. And boy, nobody wanted to hear that in the 70s.
Right.
We don't want somebody telling us drugs are bad, But the impact of the album when it came out was just like it. I think it sort of shocked everybody, and well, why do I want to put that on and be depressed, But it was a piece of art, and art sometimes doesn't make you feel good necessarily, but it makes you feel.
Right.
And that's the whole key to it, just like that painting called The Scream.
Yeah.
When you look at that thing, man, that does stuff to you emotionally.
Yeah.
When you that, and that's what art is supposed to do. It's supposed to be some sort of a communicator, but also just something that it stirs you,
Right.
And when I heard the album the first time, I mean, I remember I was recording stuff sort of out of sequence, so I didn't hear the album in the order that it was intended to be in, and it tells a story. And I didn't really get the story because I was playing so many different. It was out of order, so it's like doing a movie out of order, you know. So when I finally heard it, I was completely blown away by how brilliant it was, and I was convinced, and I still am, that Lou Reed was a genius.
Yeah.
Question.
And was that the time also that you was that the first time you worked with Dick Wagner?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did the tour. I didn't actually, I don't think he did very much on the Berlin album.
Right.
He did some
Right.
vocals, and I think he did a rhythm guitar part on Sad Song. I'm not sure, but he wasn't on that album very much, just a little bit.
Sure.
But when we went to tour, when we put together, Bob put together a band to tour, Dick was the other guitar player, and that's when we first met.
See, and I've always liked the way that the two of you played together. Well, first of all, I was a sideman for years, and so I've always loved and respected that. But I like the way that you guys played together and didn't, you know, it was an equal thing. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't, oh, look at me, you know, and the other guy in the background just playing the rhythm. You guys took your turn, and it was, you know, you always had enough time for each one of you to shine. I always enjoyed that.
Well, we did when we finished rehearsing for the tour, and we went to Europe first, and then we came back to America. But as we were getting close to the end of the rehearsals, he and I sat down with the set list, and we marked it. Okay, you're going to play the first solo in this verse, and I'll play this solo in this verse, and you take the ending on this one, and I'll take the ending. We were meticulous about making sure that we both got equal share of the solos.
That's awesome.
And it was really, really cool that there was no bickering about that or anything. We just sat down and worked it all out, and we did. We had a pretty much an equal say in the soloing, you know,
Right.
Which was great. I mean, I loved that. I thought it was really cool. We didn't have any trouble getting along or figuring out what we wanted to do or any of that stuff. It was really good.
And so was it somewhere in that time the Alice Cooper thing came along, right? Somewhere.
Yeah. Right after the Lou Reed thing, I came into New York and did some overdubs on $1 Billion Babies. And I think now you have to forgive me because I'm not real sure what went on there. I wasn't in the middle of all of that. I was kind of on the outskirts. I think Dick had already done some stuff with Alice, which I didn't know. I think he'd written this. I think he wrote I Love the Dead or co-wrote it or something. I don't know what all was going on, but Dick already kind of knew them. I knew them from Detroit, but I hadn't played, you know. And then, so I went in there and did some overdubs on $1 Billion Babies, and I think Dick had already done something. And that's how I actually got involved in recording then. Although that band, that was still with the original band, of course.
Yeah.
I just did some overdubs on that album.
Now, the Alice had actually, well, you know, he had come and seen some of the shows you did with Detroit, right?
Well, I don't know. I think he did. We were kind of back in Detroit, as you may know, because you've been there.
Oh yeah.
All the bands in Detroit were pretty much fans of all the other bands. I mean, there wasn't really this feeling of competition.
Right.
It was more like everybody, all the bands supported each other. You know, we would go see. Well, there was an all-girl band there called Cradle, which I think Susie Quattro was the bass player.
Oh, okay.
We used to go see them, and they would come see us, and then we'd see MC5, and so it was like one of those kind of things where you just felt like in the Detroit area in particular, there was no competition. Everybody was supportive of everybody else. And we went to see Alice, you know, and I'm pretty sure they came to see us a couple times. And also a little bit later on down the line, when Alice had a hit with 18 and they were doing bigger venues, we opened for Alice as Mitch Ryder a couple of times. So yeah, we all knew each other. It was all a really cool thing. It was I liked the vibe in those days with bands.
Right. Now, what can you tell us about you did a lot of albums with Alice Cooper, of course you're doing other things too, and then you toured with him. I mean, what was all that like?
Well, that was fabulous. I mean, in 1975, I did the Welcome to My Nightmare album, and then we did the tour. It was the same band basically that did the album,
Right.
the tour. So we all knew each other, and it was like, and man, it was fabulous. I mean, playing 20, 30, 40,000 seaters every night. It was fabulous. I mean, it was to me, what I always wanted to do. I always wanted to get on stage in front of that many people and make music. The funny thing is, it never scared me, or I never felt nervous or any of that stuff. I felt excited, but I never felt nervous. I always felt like, let's go out there and kick some ass. That's what it always felt like every night when we went on stage with Alice. And we did. I mean, we did our best every night. We wanted to show all those people out there that we could make as much noise as they could and put out as much energy as they gave us. And that's the most wonderful thing about playing live, is that interplay between you and the audience. It's fabulous.
Right. Now, as a gearhead, I'm interested in what was some of the stuff that you were playing back then, or at any time. But what was your main guitars and amps back then?
Well, funny thing is, it was real simple because I wasn't into multiple guitars and multiple amps or any of that stuff. In fact, we didn't even. The only pedal I even owned at the time was an MXR Phase 90.
Oh yeah.
Which I used on the Lou Reed tour on the Rock and Roll Animal album. And then I later on got the Phase 100, which was a big fancier version of the Phase. And then I also bought the MXR Dynacomp, which is a great compressor. I still have. They're fabulous. I still use those. But with Alice, I think the only thing I had was a Marshall half stack, 100 watt, I think it was, and an Echoplex. And that was it. There were no pedals. We just played through the amp and cranked the amp. I first started the tour. I had an SG, a Gibson SG. And then I also had the Les Paul TV Special that I also had on the Lou Reed album, Rock and Roll Animal. Unfortunately, the neck broke on that guitar, which is some Gibson guitars are notorious for that, as most guys. Yeah, I broke the neck on that, so I used my SG for a little while, and then I got a BC Rich Seagull, and Dick and I used those for most of the rest of the '75 tour. I got well into BC Rich. They made some beautiful guitars.
Oh yeah,
several years. But that's it. Unfortunately, not much in the way of gear in those days,
Right. Yeah, but it was really good stuff.
It was great stuff. Yeah, really good stuff. Yeah.
Now, somewhere in that time came the Aerosmith thing, where you play and Train Kept Rolling. And
73, 72, 73, somewhere in there. Yeah.
Right. And I'd read that you were just there. And how, can you tell people how that happened?
Well, I was in New York at the record plant, which was my favorite studio.
Oh yeah,
it was a wonderful studio, and I was with Bob Ezrin. He was in Studio A. He was doing a major 2-inch tape edit, which in those days you had to cut it with a razor blade and tape it together.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It's very tedious. So I wanted to leave him alone to do that. And also, you don't want to open and close doors. It blows tape everywhere, So I wanted to just get out there and leave him alone, let him do that job, because it's really tough. So I'm sitting out in the lobby, and the record plant at that time had a really small lobby. And at the time I smoked cigarettes, so I was just having a cigarette. And right across from me was Studio C, which was a smaller studio. And the door opens up, and Jack Douglas pokes his head out, and he sees me there, and he says, "Well, do you feel like playing?" And I said, "Well, yeah, it's better than sitting here." So he goes into Studio A and asks Bob if it's okay if he borrows me for a few seconds to do some recording. And Bob said, "Yeah, I'm editing. It's going to be a while." So Jack grabbed my favorite amp at the time, which was a Tweed Twin that the record plant owned. It was a really fabulous sounding amp. And he brought it into Studio C, and I plugged in, and basically that was it. I did a couple of passes, and he said, "Yeah, that's it." So it was. I think they were just looking for this sort of frantic, high energy rock stuff.
Yeah.
And it just so happened that's what I felt like playing when I heard it, and they kept it. They said, "Yeah, that's it." I think it was the second pass, and that was it. I was done. I went back out in the lobby and had another cigarette. So
Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about a couple of mid 70s records you were on. And the first one, as a big Cream fan, what was it like being on Jack Bruce's record? And I know you were with some great drummers on that too, Keltner and Gordon.
Both of them were.
Yeah.
Well, for me, it was a dream come true. Yeah. I was a huge Cream fan. I mean, in fact, I've told people this before. I was petrified that people are going to hear me play and realize all I was doing is playing Clapton licks, because I just studied him like a, and I was really afraid somebody was going to catch me and call me out on it. But I had every album. I never got to see them live, and I was really bummed that I didn't. When I first met Jack, which was on the Berlin album, we hit it off right off the bat. Oh my God, that's Jack Bruce, man. Shit, he was sitting right across from me. I was like, wow, this is so cool. So then when he called me up to do an album, like I say, we got along really well, and he called me to do the album. And of course, yes, please. And it was in Los Angeles at the Los Angeles record plant, which was at the time was another great studio. Unfortunately, that one's burned down, but it was a great studio. So, and then I found out who the drummers were, and I thought, oh my God, I must have died and gone to rock and roll heaven. It's just silly. There's Keltner for a week and Jimmy Gordon for a week. And I actually did more stuff with Jimmy Gordon later on, and he actually played on my first solo album. He played drums. So, here's the Layla drummer. Oh my God, what am I doing? Keltner has played with George Harrison and all the. Oh my God!
Oh yeah.
It was like that was a little scary at first, because I thought, well, I'm either going to sink or swim.
Right.
And it was only three of us at a time. It was either me, Jack, and Keltner, or me, Jack, and Gordon. That was it. There was nobody else on the record at the time. It's just a trio. So I thought, I got to sink or swim. So what's wonderful about that, though, is sometimes that edge that happens when you might feel a little intimidated, or you might feel a little like, oh crap, man, am I in the right place? You have to just say, okay, look, I'm not going to lose a thing. I got to go for it.
Yeah.
And that edge puts something into your fingers and into your psyche when you're playing that makes you perform better than maybe even you think you can. It's really an extraordinary feeling. After about the first 2 or 3 days, I couldn't wait to get in the studio and find out what Jack was going to have us play. His music was very difficult. It was not easy.
Right.
There's a lot of stuff about it I didn't fully understand, but I figured out ways to find things to play, and that was good for me. That was really good for me. It was like I learned as much off of that as I did enjoy playing on it. I mean, it was like I went to school, and it was a wonderful experience. And Jack and I hung out a lot. We played Scrabble together. And he had his friend Peter Brown, who was his lyricist.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And boy, those two guys, you don't want to play Scrabble with. They were ridiculous. They always beat me. So, but especially Pete Brown, because he's a lyricist, English.
Oh
major.
yeah.
But it was. I had a blast.
And the other one from that roughly time period that I wanted to ask you about was Dr. John.
Yeah. Dr. John was a little later, maybe 76 or so, or 77. I'm not sure. I don't
Somewhere in
remember.
there, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Dr. John, of course, I had never met him. I didn't meet him until I met him in the studio, but I knew who he was, and I knew he was Dr. John the Night Tripper. You know,
Right.
he was the coolest guy on the planet. So I was really looking forward to doing that album because I loved his piano playing, and his singing and all that stuff. There was one beautiful moment in the studio. He and I got to be really good friends, and we were changing the studio around. They were moving the drums and all that. And we were just kind of hanging out. So he goes over to the piano. There's a beautiful grand piano in this studio, Cherokee in Los Angeles, a beautiful studio. And he went over and sat down on the piano and started playing all this wonderful New Orleans jazz stuff. And I sat down on the bench next to him and I said, "Wow, what's that, man?" He said, "Oh, this is something I learned from Professor Longhair." And then he would play something else. He'd say, "I learned this from UB Blank. What's his name? I can't remember his name.
I know who you're talking about. And,
you know what I'm talking about? And
yeah.
He just kept playing all this UB Blake. That's his name.
That's right.
And he sat down there and played on the piano all this incredible New Orleans jazz stuff. And it was telling me where he got it all. This is Jelly Roll Morton, you know, and I was like, this is a moment I'm never going to forget because I'm hearing the real deal from the real deal.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know? And I never forgot that moment. It was the most beautiful thing because I felt like not only did I go through a history of New Orleans jazz piano, but I got it from the guy who's going to know more about it than just about anybody else. And it was fabulous. I had a lot of joy doing that record with Dr. John.
Yeah, I worked for Hall & Oates for 10 years. And Shane, I got to know Shane Terrio. He's a guitarist and band leader for the band and for Live from Daryl's House. And he produced Dr. John's last record. It hasn't come out yet, but he has such great stories about working with him too. It was just he said he had a blast.
He's a terrific guy. I saw him again at the Hall of Fame when he got inducted into the Hall of Fame. I was substituting for Glenn Buxton for Alice's band, who of course had passed away. So I was subbing for him. I was playing guitar for him in the when Alice and the Alice Cooper band got inducted. And it was great to see him again. He remembered me, and then to hear him perform "Right Place at the Right Time," that song.
Oh yeah.
He still was just as cool as he always was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He was wonderful. Great guy too. Great guy.
Supporting T-Bone's Primecast podcast gives you the inside views from the talk space where musicians matter. Go to tbpcpodcast.com and click the donate button. All contributions are much appreciated. And that brings me to the Peter Gabriel. And how did you get hooked up with him?
Well, that was through Bob Ezrin again. You know,
right.
I guess Peter kind of asked Bob, or I don't know how it worked out, but to sort of put together a band.
Okay.
You know? And Peter did want Robert Fripp, we were all cool with that. You know, Robert Fripp was going to come over and do it, but by that time, Bob had worked with Tony Levin, excuse me, and Alan Schwartzberg, and Larry Fast, and Jimmy Malin. So these guys were all in the band.
Great.
And then I came along because I worked so much with Bob. And it was really great because I didn't know anybody in the room. So it was kind of cool for me in a way, you know, that I always liked that. I always liked going to the studio with players I'd never met and start zero and see what happens. So I immediately fell in love with these guys because they were superb players. Tony Levin, especially, he's still a friend of mine, and we still do stuff together. But and there was a guy named Joey Chiodowski who was playing keyboards, a great keyboard player from Canada. So it was this great big band. It was like 8 people, something like that, on the basic track. So it was basically like playing the album live, which was fabulous. I mean, because when you went into the studio, when you went into the control room to hear the thing playback, it was like, wow, it's almost done. There were overdubs done, of course, and solos and things like that, and orchestras. There was a couple of songs that had orchestra on it. But Peter was, I didn't really know him that well. I wasn't a big Genesis fan.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It was kind of prog rock, and I wasn't really into prog rock. I was into Cream, on Jimmy Hendrix.
Sure.
And but when I heard the first song, and I don't remember which one it was, I just remember the first song I heard. I thought, "Oh my God, this guy's amazing."
Yeah.
And each song got better and better and better and better, and then Salisbury Hill comes along, and I'm thinking, well, this guy's a genius. I met another genius, so I worked with Lou Reed. He's a genius. Alice is a genius as a showman and as a lyricist, singer, and then Peter. And of course, Jack Bruce was beyond the pale, So I started feeling this thing like, oh my God, so all these people I'm working with are bloody geniuses. And sometimes you feel like, well, what the hell am I here for? You know what I mean? But it didn't take long for me to feel like when you hear the songs, you just want to do them as best you can because you have a lot of respect for the artist and you have a lot of respect for the music. So there was real joy in doing that album. I haven't done that many albums where I didn't feel the same joy doing them. And I'm not going to name the ones I didn't. Get me in trouble.
So how did well, of course, the whole album's great, but, everybody always talks about Salisbury Hill. Now, yeah. I know that, a lot of the people a lot of the guys on the record had to leave before that was even recorded, right?
Yeah, unfortunately. Well, Fripp had to leave. He left about 2 days before we actually recorded Salisbury because he had sessions lined up in London.
Oh, okay.
So he had to get back and go to work. And then the New York guys, which were Tony and Jimmy Malin and Alan Schwartzberg and Larry Fast, all had to go back to New York the next day. So we only had one night to record Salisbury Hill. But as it turned out, it only took that one evening to record the song. It's one of those songs that's so brilliantly written that it really doesn't take much to get a good take because the song is so good. And it's in an odd time. It's in 7/4.
Right.
Which I thought scared me at first because I hadn't played it any real odd times. But with Jack Bruce, we played some odd little bits, but we never played a whole song in a 7/4. I did. So I was a little scared. And the first pass, I was very concentrating on counting to make sure I did it right. But then it didn't take long for me to realize that, this thing is so bloody well written that all I have to do is just play the song and it all works itself out. So the second and third take, I didn't have to count at all. I just played. It's one of those songs,
Just felt it.
Yeah. You just feel it. You just go with the flow of the song.
No, I'd heard that wasn't even your guitar that you played on that, right?
No, I didn't have an acoustic guitar at the time. So there was this really wonderful second engineer named Jim Frank. He was a good friend of mine. He helped teach me a lot about recording. Very smart guy, very cool guy, really funny. He had a beautiful old Martin. I think it was a D28.
Oh, okay.
And so I used his guitar. That's because I didn't have one. So I used his guitar. So that's his guitar on Salisbury Hill.
And all that song is that's capable of what at the 7th fret?
No, on the 2nd fret.
2nd fret. Oh, that's right. It's in B.
It's B.
Yeah, that's right.
But we played it in sort of the A position.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's on the second fret. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I want to talk a little bit about Swept Away because that's one of my favorite records. And I still almost every week listen. Well, I listen to a lot of it, but I listen to Rubber Man.
Oh, yeah.
For some reason that one is on play all the time in my head and and on the computer and everything else.
Yeah. Well, that's funny. I don't know where, you got to understand, I don't know where a lot of those songs came from.
Great.
It's a funny thing when you sit down to write a song, it doesn't really, you don't really use mental power so much. I don't know where they come from. You're sitting down and you're playing a guitar, and all of a sudden something pops out of your fingers that becomes a song. I have no idea where that comes from. and everything on that album, in fact, everything I write, I have no idea where it comes from. You can be inspired by many, many, many things, classical music or cream tunes or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
But when it comes to what comes out of your fingers, I don't know where that comes from. I'm just glad
it just flows. It flows through you.
Yeah.
Now I wanted to ask you a little bit about how you became involved in the Rose with Bette Midler, and being in the movie and actually writing a song on the soundtrack, the whole bit. I mean, it's just fascinating.
Well, that was another one of those things where the phone rang, and the guy on the other end was named Paul Rothchild. Paul Rothchild was a very, very famous producer. He produced The Doors,
oh yeah,
all the stuff. I think he produced a couple of Janis Joplin albums and a band called Rhinoceros in Canada, where
oh yeah,
the guitar player was named Danny Weiss, and Danny was also in the movie. Paul knew Danny really well, so Paul got Danny in the movie right away. But they were looking for another guitar player, so I was called to come down and audition. So I went down and auditioned, and they liked me. So there was some time lapse between when we actually did the audition until we started rehearsing. They need to see you. They don't just take it on. Well, oh yeah, he's a great guitar player. You got to see you because they got to see how you're going to look on film and stuff.
Sure.
So I went down and auditioned, and I already knew Danny really well. So I thought, well, this will be fun if I can do it, And it turns out I got the gig, and then the rest is just wonderful. I had a wonderful experience. Bette was a sweetheart. Absolutely loved her to death. She was like a sister. We were like brother and sister, and I really loved her. She's very funny, and she's a genius, brilliant singer and actress. And I had a lot of fun doing the movie. Doing a movie for me is like a lot of fun. I don't know if I ever really caught the acting bug per se, but I mean, I could see myself doing more of it because you get to pretend to be something else, and that's
right.
Just a lot. But it was funny because I was pretending to be another guitar player, so I didn't go too far, but it was fun. And then the song Camellia just happened to happen again. It was one of those things I was noodling around with it at lunchtime during rehearsal, and the band, as they finished their lunch, they got up on stage and started playing along with me. And before you know it, the whole band's playing Camellia, which is the song I wrote, and it sounds fabulous. I thought, wow, this is great. These guys are playing this thing really great. We had horns and everything. And Paul Rothchild walked in and heard it and said, oh, man, it's fabulous. We got to have that in the movie. So that was just one of those lucky things, that it happened that he heard it and wanted it in the movie. So that was a cool thing. I didn't have much to do with that either.
Now, I know you had some other roles too in the movies or TV shows.
Yeah, I did. I mean, there's a few movies that I did where I ended up playing the guitar player. Well, my God, come on. The reason they want you to is because a lot of times when you get an actor that's never touched a guitar or something,
exactly,
you want him in a band, you can tell he can't play.
Yeah.
And it's not his fault. He just doesn't know what
No,
to do.
yeah.
I would get called. I got called several times to play guitar player in a movie, so that you could tell I knew what was going on with guitar, so it looked like I was really playing. But I did do a couple of movies where I had little small bit parts, and I wasn't a guitar player. Those were fun. Those were really fun.
Now, jump up to 1989 here. Another one of my favorite records was the one you did, the IRS record, the Deacon.
Yeah.
And that also led to the Night of the Guitars thing.
Yeah.
And,
well, that was something I just happened to see an article. I was living in Los Angeles. There was a newspaper there called the LA Weekly.
mm-hmm.
And that was a great newspaper because it kind of kept you up to snuff on what was happening in Los Angeles and in the music business too, quite a bit. There was a big club section and stuff, and I happened to see an article by Miles about Miles Copeland, and he was doing a new label, and the label was called Guitar Speak. And he was saying he was looking for 70s guitar players. Well, that's me. So I called him. He had a number, and I called him and talked to him directly. And he said, "Well, bring me by some tapes. Let me hear some." I brought by some stuff. He liked it. He said, "Well, have you got enough songs to do an album?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "All right. Well, I want you in the studio in about a week. We need to get this thing out." Well, I had lied to him. I only had one song. So I had a week to write an album. And so I was up all night, a couple of nights, and all kinds of stuff. And I actually wrote the album in about a week. And then we recorded it about a week and a half, something like that, really fast. Anyway, I liked Miles. He was a tough businessman and all that stuff. And I'd heard stuff about him being really hard ass, but I didn't find him that way. I found him to be very, very generous and kind. And he really cared. He loved artists, and he loved musicians and performers. He loved them. And he wanted to do as much for them as he could. So because of that, that was inspiration for me to write the album. And like I say, when you sit down, when somebody says to you, "Write me an album," and you got a week to do it, you know what? You do it. I was one song short when we got into the studio, and he said, "Can you write me one more song?" And I said, no, he said, "Have you got another song?" And I said, "Oh yeah, sure." Another one. I exhausted everything. But I wrote, the last song I wrote was the one called "The Old Man in the Boat." And I actually wrote that in an evening, one evening, and then we went in and recorded it the next day.
Wow.
Yeah. And see, I got to say, I love working like that because it puts this creative edge on your head and your emotions and all that stuff. You tend to not think as much. You just play. And there's something really, really organic about that, for lack of a better term. There's something about that to me really is exciting because you go in there and you just play and this stuff comes out. And you think, wow, where did that come from? And then you say, well, I don't care. I'm just glad it did. That's how that album came about, though. I mean, and it was great. I had such wonderful experiences doing it. I had some great players. Jimmy Johnson on bass. He's an amazing bass player. Unfortunately, Bruce Gary's passed away, but he was an awesome drummer. He was in the Knack. He was the drummer for. And a very, very dear friend of mine, Jack White, from Detroit, who played drums with Rick Springfield. And I knew Jack. Jack and I had played around L.A. and jamming and stuff. And I knew I wanted Jack on there because he's a great blues drummer. So that was it. And again, it was three-piece, me and Jim and Jack or Bruce Gary.
Wow. We
put down the basic tracks, and then I overdubbed a bunch of stuff. I still kind of like to work like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Now, I had an FM radio show for 11 years, and I was always it was always free form. I would play sometimes 6, 7 different styles of music, in a show, and that's
Yeah.
what I always enjoyed about you was that as sideman you were just all over the place,
Yeah.
and what somebody that you played with that I didn't know about it at first was Julian Lennon.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And how what was that like, or how did that come about?
Well, that came about through Bob Ezrin again, because Bob, the album, the album's called Help Yourself.
Right.
It's a great album. In fact, Karen and I are working on a version of one of the songs off that album called Saltwater, which is a really beautiful song. We're working on our own version of that as we speak. But I knew who Julian was a long time ago because I knew John had a son, way
Right.
back ago, and I knew who he was. And plus the fact that he had a few hits of his own,
Right.
through the 80s. And when I heard he was doing another album and I was going to get to play on it, I was thrilled because here's John's son, Julian, and Julian is one of the sweetest guys I've ever met. He's just one of the first thing he did when I absolutely first met him is, "Do you want a cup of tea?" And I said, "Sure." So he went and made me a cup of tea. That was one of the best cup of teas I ever had. It was amazing. And then we sort of hit it off like we'd known each other forever. He's a real sweet guy. And so I really enjoyed working with him and doing that album.
And you also played with Tracy Chapman, and
Yeah.
I know you played a lot of I mean it was I forget now, but I mean you played a lot of different roles in that.
Yeah. Tracy's music, which, by the way, I happen to enjoy doing that.
Oh yeah.
Her music is she doesn't live by the rules when it comes to music. She writes exactly what she wants to write, and then when she puts it together, arrangement wise and production wise, it's pretty much whatever she thinks sounds good, and I love that about her. I really admire that about her. Most of the people that I've worked with through my career have been that way. They don't listen to the rules. They don't do anything by the rules. It's always, like she was the first. When she wrote and when she wrote and produced Fast Car,
Right.
and that came out as a single, no one else had the courage to do like a sort of a folky song with real drums and all that stuff, very organic sounding record. Everybody else was doing drum machines and synthesizers and all kinds of stuff.
Right.
But here Tracy comes out with this wonderful, wonderful song, Fast Car. And it's got real drums and real bass player and all that stuff. It was, as soon as I saw her the first time, I thought, oh man, this girl is a genius. And I know I use that word a lot, but I've just been lucky to work with geniuses.
It fits. Yeah.
Like through most of my career, I can't help it. They really are. And she's just another one. See, and then when I got to do the tour with her, the shows, I got to play dobro. I got to play acoustic guitar. I got to play mandolin. I got to play electric guitar, of course, and sometimes slide guitar, depending on which song we did. But I got to do even a dulcimer. So I got to play all these different instruments.
Right.
It makes the show very exciting for you as a musician. You can't get bored with the show.
Right.
You can't get any kind of bored with a show like that. It's fabulous, And she would also change the set list occasionally, so we never knew exactly until the night of the show. She would add takeaway songs, so you'd be, oh, cool, we're doing this one tonight. That's great. So you knew about 30 or 40 of her songs. It was great. And each night there would be something a little different about that. Sometimes she wouldn't play it the same way every time. That was fabulous. That just makes you have to have faith in your band, and you have to have faith in yourself that you can do that, and you got to have the courage to do it. But she always, always, always pulled it off. Always. The audience was never ever disappointed in a show ever. I mean, she was just fabulous. She could do an entire show by herself, but then she could also do an entire show with a band, and it's just as good. that's a genius to me. So I loved working with her. I really did.
And the an artist that I found interesting that you had worked with was Dave Lee Roth.
Yeah, yeah,
and you actually what you co-wrote what 4 of the songs on that
yeah.
record?
Yeah, there were 4 songs that Brett Tuggle and I wrote with David Lee Roth on Little Ain't Enough, that album. Yeah.
Right. Now I saw him on that tour, and at the time with being pre-internet and everything, we were expecting to see Jason.
Yeah,
And when we got there, I think it was Joe Holmes. So
that's right.
they mainly just did old Van Halen songs.
Yeah.
But that big fan of Jason. And
Well, I was too. I am too.
sure.
I still am. Yeah.
And tell people a little bit about, I know they sent Jason to you for some lessons, right? For how to play blues.
Yeah, some blues, some blues lessons with rhythm guitar, maybe, as well as solo.
Sure.
And he was great, actually, because at the time he came over to my apartment to take lessons, he was way into Stevie Ray Vaughan, which was a wonderful thing to hear, because
Yeah.
all I had heard from him was cacophony, and it was all incredible shredding. And I thought, well, I really thought that he and I weren't going to get along very well, because I just didn't think, he would see we would be close enough to get into anything together, But as it turned out, he was so into Stevie Ray Vaughan, I turned him on to Albert King, and he was really learning blues well, man. He would, if he could have just not gotten sick, he would have been an amazing blues player.
Yeah.
He was really on the road to that, and he's still a great friend. We're still good friends.
Now I was lucky enough that you and Karen had sent me some records, that I played on the air.
Yeah.
When I had the radio show, and the Manhattan Blues Project, the Tone Poem Live, Before the Lights Go Out, and then her record Empty Spaces. I played all those, and
oh, good.
And they were I love them to this day. And can you say anything about, I know we're running short of time, but can you say anything about any of those projects or anything?
Well, yes, I can say one thing about actually about 2 things. Manhattan Blues was something that just sort of came to me. A friend of mine had sent me a photo she had taken. She's a great photographer. She'd taken this wonderful photo of Central Park in New York City right at sunset. And as soon as I saw it, this song idea came into my head, and literally came into not the whole song, but a big chunk of it. And I sat down and started playing it, and it was almost like it was a song that fit the photo.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking, well, wait a minute, I freaking love Manhattan. Why don't I write a bunch of songs about my favorite places in Manhattan, Gramercy Park, and the Dakota. The Dakota's the John Lennon and Yoko Ono building stuff, and I Hudson River, all that stuff. The whole album idea came from that one photo, and I really wanted to just do like this album as a tribute to Manhattan, because I spent so much time there doing records and stuff. I really, really enjoyed it there. And New York is like one of my favorite cities in the world. It's hard not to like that place. It's just fabulous. The energy and the rock and roll that I felt from there, and Lou Reed being from there, and all Manhattan, Kansas City, and all these incredible places. So I wanted to do a tribute to Manhattan, and it became the Manhattan Blues Project. Then the other album, Karen's album, Empty Spaces. The thing is, I always thought that she had. I mean, I heard her sing on a lot of different kinds of things. When she was working with Georgia Moroder, it was more disco and pop kind of stuff. And then she got into jazz, and she did jingles, and so she could sing. But she had I was watching her do a gig one night. She did these sometimes horrible gigs, that we all do, the ones there. And, she'd be in this bar and nobody really paying attention to her, but she'd be singing the tracks. As she started singing, I think it was a Fleetwood Mac tune. Yeah, it was a Fleetwood Mac tune. And her voice changed. Suddenly she sang it in a different voice. And I thought, that voice sounds fabulous. We got to do an album with that voice. So when we finally got all settled and I had a studio and everything, I suggested, and we sat and talked about it, let's do an album, a Karen album. And it's going to be you write the songs, I'll do the tracks, you write the songs, and it should be about anything you want, anything in your personal life or your kids or anything you want to talk about. But you've got to use that voice. And I got to tell you, I'm proud of that album. I think there's some beautiful things on that record, and I think we're going to do at least one or two more sort of in that same vein.
Oh, great.
Yeah, because I love the way she sings when she sings. We did some sort of jazzy things, a version of "It's Wonderful," and a couple things. It's on an EP.
Covered with Love.
It's called "Covered with Love." So they're all cover tunes.
Right.
Tony Levin played bass on it. You can find it.
I've got that on my list here. I love Spooky.
Yeah, me too. I always wanted to do that song because I did it in a cover band way back in the day, and I always liked it. I thought it was a great song, so it was great. We got to do it again, So we had fun doing that, and but I really like the way Empty Spaces came out, and I think it's time we had some newer versions of that vibe with that kind of vibe with her voice like that, but new songs. So we're going to work on that, I think, next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how long now have you lived in Spain?
What's it been? About 3 years? I think it's been about 3 years. In fact, we moved here right around now, about 3 years ago, in 2017. So we've been here 3 years. Can
you tell me a little bit about the trees you planted in the front yard?
Oh, so yeah, that Karen said. Okay, so I don't remember all of the things that went around this. Here's what happened. We had a wonderful cherry tree in our front yard that used to just burst with cherries. I mean, there'd be so many cherries. We'd have the neighbors come pick some, and there'd still be tons left, And then we had this big old oak tree. Well, both trees got hit really hard with worms, and it ended up killing both trees. So we had to cut them down. So I think I was about 10 or 11, maybe 12. There were no trees in our front yard. So the next door neighbor, the people who live right next to us, had a small little maple tree that when it started to seed, you get these helicopters. You've probably seen them.
Oh, yeah.
The seed is in there, and there's a thing, and it helicopters down to the ground. Mm-hmm. So picked up a couple of them one day, and I thought, I wonder what happened if I'd stick those in the grass. So I got a milk carton. I got a couple of milk cartons and cut the top off and scooped up a bunch of dirt and threw it in there and just stuck the thing in there. And lo and behold, it started growing. There's 2 trees. So I ended up using it, I think, as a science project in the 6th grade, I think. And so I took it back home and let them grow. I got up to the point where they got to be sort of saplings, and they were growing really fast. So I couldn't believe how quickly they were growing. So I planted them in the front yard, and at one point I was thinking about making the limbs arch together, but then I found out when you do that, it's really difficult. It's very difficult. A lot of chemicals involved and stuff. So I wasn't able to do that. So I was going to plant 3. One of them died. So I had 2 next to each other, well, kind of next to each other, about 20 feet apart. I planted them in the ground. I wasn't sure they were going to take. I was afraid they were going to die through the winter or something. Didn't know how strong they were. But no, the next summer they started leaving. They had leaves popping out everywhere. They were about 4 or 5 feet tall.
Wow.
And they started growing a little bit. I mean, And then I get drafted. In '68, I get drafted. So I'm in the Army for a couple of years, right? I come back home, and there are these giant trees, enormously giant maple trees in my. Right now, if you go to my house, those two maple trees are the biggest trees on the whole block. They're just enormous. I never thought these little tiny things would just exploded. It was unreal. But I'm very proud of them. My sister curses them once in a while because they get, if there's a big snow, branches will break off, and it gets a little dangerous, because they're so high and they're so big. But she loves them, I think, as much as we all do. But they speak. I mean, it's like they're my pals. They're a couple of friends I have that's stuck in the ground that just went berserk. They just love the ground. I don't know how far the roots go. They must go a block away.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, just a couple more things real quick. You can tell us a little bit about playing on the Alice Cooper's upcoming Detroit Stories record.
Oh, you mean the Detroit Stories?
Yeah.
Yeah. What? Again, this was a call from Bob. He said that Alice is doing a new record, and we're going to do this my version of rock and roll on it and stuff. And I thought, oh, that's great. So he wanted me to play some rhythm guitar, and then he wanted me to play a solo. And then by that time I knew Joe Matamasa was also going to be on the same song. So it was pretty cool to work. I've never met him. It's really playing with a guy you never met. You never met him, and still haven't met him. But he played rhythm guitar on it, and he played solo at the end and a couple of little solo things in the verses. And then I played the middle solo on that. And then I also played on another track. What was it called? Don't Give Up. I played on that. I think that's going to be on the album.
Okay.
Too. But as far as the rest of the album, I don't know much about the rest of the album. That's all I know about, really.
And
but I hear it's all Detroit stuff, so it's got to be.
And what can we expect from you next, or or anything that that you're allowed to talk about, or whatever? What have you got going on?
Well, I do have a project going on right now that I can't talk about.
Right.
Which is cool though, because the guy I'm working with is a really, really cool guy, and he has a fabulous studio. His name is Matthias, and he has a beautiful studio right here in Altea. I mean,
wow!
I couldn't believe, and I can walk to it, and it's this beautiful studio. It's a great studio. So he and I hope we do lots of stuff together. He's a great guy. He's become a very good friend. And but Karen, as I say, Karen and I are working on Saltwater from the Julian Lennon album. We're working on our own version of that. And then I want to. I've got a couple things in the can that I want to finish, but I do want to do at least one or two of songs with Karen along the lines of Empty Spaces. And see what happens. See, what we'd like to do is we like to try something, and then if we try it and we actually have a lot of fun doing it, then we'll do another one and another one. That's how the EP actually happened. Karen found this great piece of music called Harry's House on a Joni Mitchell album, and in the middle of it, there's a song called Centerpiece. I loved it. And I said, we should do a version of this. And so we found the original song and we did a version of it. And that's how the whole EP happened.
Right.
So things like that do happen with us. We'll write a couple of things. And if it doesn't work, then we'll move on. But if it does, we'll continue on. That's how it works for us.
Now, how can people pick up, or download or whatever, Covered with Love, the Cafe La Rouge thing?
It's still. Is it still on?
It's on iTunes.
It's on iTunes. Karen knows more about it than I do.
It's on Amazon.
It's on Amazon. You can also just check on my website.
Okay, SteveHunter.com.
On the homepage of the website, I have all the current available albums. If you hit the picture, the cover, it will take you to a place that you can buy from wherever.
Oh, great.
We keep that pretty up to date.
Yes.
So,
It's got Jolene on there.
Yeah, we did a version of Jolene, which.
Yeah, I listened to that last night. That was great.
Oh, good. Glad you liked it. Yeah, we liked it too. We had a lot of fun doing that too. Wanted to take it into a whole nother space, make it very Celtic and stuff, That's what I like to do when I do arrangements and stuff. I like to try to take them in another place from where they were, Sometimes I guess that works and sometimes it doesn't, but it's fun to do,
Okay. Well, this has been great. And I will say that it's always good when you can, when you can, you can talk to one of your heroes. And I thank you for that.
Well, thank you. I thank you for saying that. That's wonderful. Thank you.
It's nice to see you, Terry.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah.
Well, you guys have a good holiday and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Take care. Stay warm.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.